principle of 529 is that we will obey the authorities in whatever they ask us to do, but there is a relative subjection in the sense that we won't do what they ask us to do if they ask us to break God's law. And I think Mr. Spinks basically touched on that fairly clearly yesterday. So if in fact there is no basis to be able to retain information, we willingly will provide it. If there's a subpoena to ask for documents, we'll provide it. If there's a protection to that document, well, then that might be a different situation. But if there's no legal protection, and when it comes to child abuse matters, you may or may not be aware that ever since 1999, we've cooperated with the authorities, as far as I understand, on every instance where the authorities have asked for information. Elders have made statements, they've appeared as witnesses, documents have been produced when they've been requested. We have been absolutely open every time we've been approached by the authorities in relation to this matter.
I'm just addressing this right now at the level of the message that is sent to people reading Jehovah's Witness publications, including elders and publishers. So let me give you another example. If we can go to 127, that's tab 127, and starting at the first page so you can see what the publication is. It's Keep Yourselves in God's Love.
Yes.
And it's published in 2008, and again, this is a November 2014 printing of that publication, published by the governing body. And if we can look at page 59, that's ringtail 16. Paragraph 18. It deals with the concept of taking up the complete suit of armor. And you'll see it says, those who keep themselves in God's love also enjoy spiritual protection from Satan, who wants to deprive Christians not just of happiness, but of everlasting life. And then it's this bit that I'm interested in. It says, we have a struggle, said Paul, not against blood and flesh, but against the governments, against the authorities, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the wicked spirit forces in the heavenly places. And there's a scriptural support for that. The word struggle suggests that our fight is not long distance from the safety of hidden bunkers and so on. Furthermore, the terms governments, authorities, and world rulers indicate that attacks from the spirit realm are highly organized and deliberate. And what I'm suggesting to you is that this sends out a very clear message that adherence to the Jehovah's Witness system of beliefs should be skeptical of secular authorities and not cooperate with them unless they really have to.
I completely disagree.
Well, how are we to understand this?
We're talking about spiritual things in terms of Satan, demons, things that are really trying to attack your faith. There's a battle. To be able to preserve morality and preserve a code of behaviour that's acceptable to Christians is a battle in today's world. But can I just, again, just point you to something so that it really clarifies this issue?
Of course, I'd welcome it.
It's in Romans chapter 13. It was read yesterday, but this is the message that all Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, take really seriously. Chapter 13, and it's talking about the governments. It's talking about the secular authorities here. It says, let every person, chapter 13, verse 1, let every person be in subjection to the superior authorities. For there is no authority except by God. The existing authorities stand placed in their relative positions by God. Therefore, whoever opposes the authority has taken a stand against the arrangement of God. And it says those who have taken a stand against it will bring punishment against themselves. For these rulers are an object of fear, not to the good deed, but to the bad. Do you want to be free of fear of the authority? Keep doing good, and you will have praise from it. For it is God's minister to you for your good. But if you are doing what is bad, be in fear. For it is not without purpose that it bears the sword. It is God's minister, an avenger to express wrath against the one practicing what is bad. There is therefore compelling reason for you to be in subjection, not only on account of the wrath, that's the authority of the government, or the secular authorities, but also on account of your conscience. So Christians are being told that they are duty-bound to be obedient to the governments.
But simultaneously, they're being told they're in mortal struggle against governments and authorities. You see, this is the difficulty, Mr. Toole. I accept that there are very clear scriptures like that, but it's the case too, isn't there, that there are equally clear scriptures reproduced and referenced in your publications which say just the contrary.
I think if you read the whole of that in context and look at it, it's quite clear what it's saying. But one thing you could never, ever cite against Jehovah's Witnesses is that they are ever encouraged to disobey the law. We take it really seriously. In fact, if we weren't going to be obedient to the law, we'd be in contravention of what it says there in Romans chapter 13.
Well, I'm not going to take up the invitation to pursue that, because that'll really divert us. So I'll leave that for now with the suggestion I've made to you and your response to it.
Thank you.
Now, in paragraph 21.
21?
Of your statement, that is.
Yes.
Do you have that? You say the legal department is not involved in managing the risk of child sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses Church. That's, as I understand it, because you advise on the legal obligations. Is that right?
That's right.
Such as whether to report.
That's as far as the legal department goes.
Yes. Well, say that earlier you said it goes one step further. You as a practice make it clear to the elders.
Oh, yes, what we've discussed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right, now just dealing with mandatory reporting requirements, you set out in your statement how currently the position of the law is that the mandatory reporting requirements vary from state to state and territory.
I missed the first part of your...
I said I'm moving now to deal with the question of mandatory reporting requirements. You've set out in your statement that insofar as the law is concerned, those requirements vary across the states and territories of Australia. Is that right?
Yes.
And I would take it then, and I'm asking you, that that's burdensome on an organisation such as yours to keep track of the differences in each state and have to advise accordingly.
Yes.
Whether it's achievable or not, of course, is another question entirely, but I take it you, as a lawyer, the senior lawyer in the organisation, would welcome it if the requirements across the states and territories were made uniform.
Yes, I would.
Now, with regard to confessional privilege, which you mention in various places, but for example, let's look at your paragraph 29.
29?
You'll see in 29A, you're dealing with South Australia, and you say a number of nominated persons in various professions, including ministers of religion, and you go on, are required to report, and then 4 lines down you say, provided that the suspicion is formed in the course of the person's work or in carrying out their official duties within the exception of disclosures made in the confessional. So I might understand there that leaving aside the specific wording of the law in question, that in South Australia the position is there's an exception for disclosures made in a confessional setting. Is that right?
Yes.
And then 29B, in relation to Victoria, equally in the 6th line, you say this obligation does not apply if the belief was obtained in a religious confession.
Yes, correct.
And I think I took you to a paragraph earlier in another document that referred to minister communicant privilege. Now, it's really that I'm addressing within the Jehovah's Witness context. you, as I understand it, advise elders on their obligations under these provisions.
Yes.
So you would be involved in advising when this confessional exception is available to them or not.
The last 15 years, even if it was a confession, if the authorities approached the elders seeking information, they have completely cooperated. So there's been no claim for confessional privilege at all during that period.
So do I understand from that that within the Jehovah's Witness view of things, an obligation, confidence that arises from a confession being made is one that is overridden by any requirements of the law?
That's the position we've taken.
Not so in some other religions where a priest who receives a confession in the requisite circumstances would face jail before breaking the confidence of that confession.
Yes, that's the situation.
And within the Jehovah's Witness understanding of things, what would be the elements or the requirements for something to amount to a confession?
Well, someone confesses.
As simple as that.
Well, I guess you can have in different settings, but if somebody came to me personally and confessed, I'd consider that as a confession. If it was a serious matter that we're dealing with and there was a judicial committee and the person confessed to what, in fact, was it some wrongdoing or whatever, that would be a confession.
All right, let me clarify. In the first example you gave, someone came to you, I take it that's you as an elder.
Yes, that's what I mean.
So it would need to be to an elder or an elder of the organisation, not someone else. Would that be one of the elements?
Yes, that would be one of the elements.
And would another element be that the confession was made confidentially? In other words, that the person made it in circumstances where a confidence attached to it?
In circumstances of confidence, yes, that would be the case.
And that would that include in circumstances where the elder to whom the confession was made was not going to pass it on to others?
Well, that would depend upon the usage, for example, of the church. For example, if in fact a confession had been made about a very serious matter, the usage of the church in the context of that would be to mention to the body of elders that a very serious matter, broadly the nature of that wrongdoing without any details, and then the body of elders would appoint a committee to meet with that individual. They would then all collectively hear the confession.
And that might then lead to a judicial committee?
Yes, or that would be, yes.
And that would lead to a report to the branch?
Yes, and the report to the branch would simply set out, that would be handled in the service department. They would simply, under the same cloak of confidentiality, they would take that, put it in the file if it was, for example, something, and then it would be filed there, child abuse permanently.
And available for people having the requisite authority or responsibility in the branch to access in years to come?
In terms of the service department, those that were charged with that, yeah, that would be the usage of the church, the usage of a confessional structure, yes.
And the details would be filed also in the congregation files?
Yes, basic details, yes, because now, if we're talking about a child abuse matter, or just generally.
Well, let's be specific about child abuse. We may as well take that as an example.
Well, that would be, the branch now in the service department retains all the files in relation to that, the congregation there, if they dealt with it, have sufficient just to be aware of what had happened. But there would be a notation there, but it would be retained in the service department.
But not the case that some report has to be put in a sealed envelope and kept in the congregation files?
Yeah, yes, a brief little report, yes.
Yes, and that's There's a purpose to keeping it in the files, so that it can be referred to in the future if it needs to be.
Yes, if that was the case, yes.
That may be elders some years down the track who had no involvement earlier on.
Well, the direction is that anyone that opens the letter should be one of the people that were involved in handling the matter.
Well, so
that mightn't always be possible, but that's the direction.
Getting to Mr. Toole, as you will have seen, is really the confidentiality of the confession in the case of the Jehovah's Witnesses is very qualified, isn't it? That it can end up being a lot of different people who end up having access to that information.
That's possible, but in view of the position we've taken in this country as far as disclosing information, if the authorities seek information about the particular confession in relation to child abuse matters, we've been forthcoming and we've waived any privilege that might otherwise have existed anyway.
Yes, well, of course, that may not always be the case. I mean, there may be circumstances in which you change the position.
That's potentially the case, yes.
Now, dealing with the question of working with children or analogous checks, I understand that if someone is nominated to be an elder, then a working with children clearance is sought. Is that right?
Well, they normally would have had one before they were nominated as an elder, because even as a ministerial servant, they're required to have one before they can serve in that capacity in those states where it's a requirement.
Okay. And what happens when someone is nominated, or there's an intention to nominate someone, and they can't get that clearance?
They're not appointed.
And the efficacy of that system, of the working with children and analogous check system, of course, depends upon the authorities having a database of information with regard to sexual offences. Is that right?
Yes, I understand so.
So that they can then reference that database to decide whether a clearance will be given in a particular case or not given.
Yes.
And so the efficacy of the system then depends on what information is furnished to the authorities to be captured in the database.
That's a corollary, yes, I presume.
What I suggest is that if the Jehovah's Witnesses don't systematically report offenders within their midst, then that information doesn't get to the authorities and it undermines the efficacy of the system.
That's to some degree, but on the other hand, to report the matter when they're not required to, if the people involved who are the victim in this instance don't want it reported, you've got two contrary principles competing with each other. In actual fact, under those circumstances, to go and report it anyway in the face of someone saying, I don't want it reported, when there was no requirement for the minister to report it, basically means that you're walking all over the right of someone to decide what is in their best interest.
Well, we've traversed that, and you've accepted there may very well be circumstances in which a person's not in a position to report, or they require reporting in order to be protected. So the blanket statement doesn't apply across the board. But, Mr. Toole, you'll appreciate there's a distinction between what the law may require and what is right and what is wrong. And what we're really exploring here is what is the right way in which these matters should be handled with reference to morality. And what I'm exploring is, as it would appear, with reference to the Jehovah's Witness morality, it's not regarded as right to have a systematic system of reporting credible child sexual abuse allegations arising in your communities to the authorities.
The position basically is that it's not right to overturn someone's right to decide whether they want it done. Elders are simply not scripturally authorised to take over the best interests of someone's family.
Yes, but I think we've canvassed that, Mr. Toole. There are circumstances in which a child, the allegation a child may have, will not be reported by his or her parent or guardian, and others having responsibilities within that community, such as elders, are in a position to report to the authorities and protect the child, but you won't do it.
Well, we would do it if we felt it was necessary to protect the child, unhesitatingly. If I came across a situation and the only way that I believed I could protect a child that was in danger, I would have absolutely no hesitation at all in going to the authorities, even though I'm not required by a mandatory reporting law.
So you say the only reason why there's never been such a report is because those circumstances haven't arisen?
You're presupposing there's never been a report.
Well, that's the evidence for the Commission thus far.
I don't think you can conclude that automatically. As was pointed out yesterday, there are some, of the cases that you have, there are some 383 that have had police or authority involvement in it. The extent to which elders may or may not have reported that, I have no idea. But I do know that according to the figures produced, there were some 383 times the authorities have been involved. So I can't tell you.
Well, let's just deal with the 383. That figure was arrived at by doing a search of words in the files for things like police, authority, and so on.
So the authorities were involved in it?
Well, they may not have been, because what was actually written on the document might have said, do not report to the authorities. The search would have picked up the word authorities, and you've counted in the 383.
Well, even so, the point that I'm making, if you divided the figure substantially, it still is impossible for me to agree that elders have never gone, because I simply don't know. But I do know the authorities have been involved in a number of those cases.
And for several weeks now, you've had those.
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.